Here we go. Good evening and welcome to the July 6th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. We have a few announcements before we get started. Earlier today, we held an event to honor Joan Lemoyne. This event recognized her outstanding service to our community, and because of COVID-19 distancing requirements, we were not able to invite everyone to attend. Unfortunate, because Joan deserved to have everyone there. Not only is today Joan's 90th birthday, but this afternoon was the city's opportunity to recognize the remarkable contributions Joan has made to the quality of life in our city. I'm pleased to announce Council proclaimed today as Joan Lemoyne Day in the City of Parksville and presented Joan with the key of the City of Parksville, only the second one in the history of the city. In 2012, we recognized Michelle Stillwell with the first key to the city for her contributions to sport and community. We also named the room immediately adjacent to us where Mayor and Coffee are held. It used to be known as Room 100. We've now called it the Joan Lemoyne Room, and it has a label to say that. Joan has been a resident of Parksville since 1995, and her service to the community and countless hours of volunteering have made a significant difference to so many. And despite her young age, Joan continues to be an active volunteer in our community. She was instrumental in reestablishing the Parksville Beach Festival Society that now organizes the world-famous sand sculpturing event. Joan volunteered for many years on the Society of Organized Services Board and continues to raise funds for Cops for Cancer Tour de Rock. She continues to volunteer with the Oceanside Community Safekeeping in Touch program, the Mount Arrowsmith Branch 49 of the Royal Canadian Legion, and one of my favorite things, Coffee with the Mayor, which was started in 2009 and has continued through 2 mayors and is now back to me. Joan has always been there for me personally, and as at the very first Coffee with the Mayor, without hesitation, she took control and has been the glue that has held it together ever since. As well, Joan has been recognized for her contributions both provincially and federally. In 2012, she received the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. In 2013, the Community Ambassador Award from the City of Parksville. And in 2016, Joan was awarded the BC Medal of Good Citizenship. Joan is extremely well respected for the good work she does in our community, and recognition today by the City of Parksville is well deserved. So please join with me in congratulating Joan Lemoyne for all the things that she received. So if we could just give her a round of applause. Thank you. I would read the formal proclamation, but that would take a significant amount of time, and it is included, I believe, in the minutes. So if you are interested, that's where they are. Some more exciting news. On Friday, the city received confirmation of the successful funding award of $1,263,521 through the Investing in Canada Infrastructural Program Community Culture and Recreational Infrastructure Stream. Only the government could name something with that long of a name. For improvements to public spaces in Parksville's Community Park. The total cost of the project will be $1,723,063. The project scope includes the construction of a new outdoor stage and a multi-use gathering space in the Parksville Community Park. In 2018, the Parksville Beach Festival Society approached Council with the concept to build an outdoor stage in the Parksville Community Park. This project will become a reality with construction scheduled for completion before June 2021. The Gathering Plaza will be located near the waterfront gazebo and will feature benches, picnic tables, shade canopy, and landscaping, and will be a multi-use area which can offer performance space, shaded seating area, and public space for residents and visitors to meet and enjoy. We appreciate the significant support of the federal and provincial governments for these improvements to the Parksville Community Park, the jewel of our city, which will, with this support, will only get better. So that's very exciting news, and that should be, it's well underway as we speak. Next part that I want to do is I want to thank the residents of the city of Parksville. As of Friday, I believe it was, 80% of the residents paid their taxes that were due by July the 2nd. You think about that. We gave everybody the exemption and said, hey, if you don't want to, you can push this off until the end of September. But 80% of the residents have paid their taxes. And to me, I want to say a big thank you to the community for that. It saves us a lot of concern about whether we would have to do some moving of funds around and so on for it. But because you came through for us, this works out very well. So thank you again. Finally, I have one addition to this evening's agenda, and it's been something that's been going on for a while, namely a piece of correspondence from the Ministry of Health regarding the proposed hypodermic needle regulation bylaw. This correspondence was received late last week. Staff has been directed to follow up and get a formal answer on the bylaw, which this correspondence does not provide. It's very interesting. They sent us a letter. The letter said, we're really sorry that we said something to the newspaper before we said anything to you. We apologize for that. Of course, it was COVID's fault, but they never said why they turned it down, and they never said that they did turn it down. So we still don't have an answer from the province at this point in time. So it's the saga continues, and we're going to send a letter out to them again saying, that's fine, just tell us what you're doing and tell us why you're doing it, and see what kind of a response we get. So moving right along, sorry for taking all that time. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations for the consent agenda items. Mover and the seconder. Moved by Councillor O'Brien, second by Councillor Wilson. Discussion on anything? All right. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Delegations. After all of that, we're ready. So if you would please, this is WestUrban Developments Limited zoning amendment application at 115 McMillan Street South. Please go forward. There you go.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Sarah Alexander, and I'm the Director of Development for WestUrban Developments. So with me today is our COO, Terry Hoff. And also we have our architect who's on the phone in case we have any technical questions. Her name is Tanis Schulte from Thuja Architecture. So WestUrban not only plans and builds its properties, but we also manage them. So it's important for us to be part of the community because we will be your neighbors. We specialize in purpose-built rentals on complex development sites. Our focus is on quality developments. We are a local company with our head office in Campbell River, but we have developments across BC. And you may be familiar with our current development that you can see in the rendering here, which is on 115 Molliet Street, which is a combination of apartments and townhomes. And then you can see on the next slide the rendering on the left side of the apartments, and below that the townhomes. And then on the right side you can see what's being constructed. And you'll notice that the landscaping still needs to be done on the townhomes, but it's nearly completed. So we build what the renderings are. Our focus again on quality shows the interior of some of our other units that we have across BC, and you can see they really are high quality. We focus on essentially creating an apartment that is condo level quality, so they're quite desirable. For the site at 115 McMillan, I almost said 115 Molliet. The site is zoned Comprehensive Development CD19A, which allows 18 units of apartment for apartment buildings and with an FAR of 1.23. And so what we're proposing today is to do a minor textual amendment that will allow the apartment to have the same FAR and number of units as the assisted living facility, community care facility, and congregate care facility, which is 71 units and an FAR of 1.8. We see this site as being a really great opportunity because it's close to amenities like the McMillan Art Center. It's walking distance to local shops, services, and amenities, including the boardwalk, and has nearly waterfront access, and it's close to the downtown core. It's also has transit rate on the site, which is excellent for alternative transportation modes. So moving into the site plan and the floor plan, you can see here that we're proposing 71 units with an FAR of 1.8. The building is proposed to be 15.5 meters or 4 stories, and the allowable height is 16 meters. We also are proposing a lot coverage of 49.5%, and the permitted amount is 50%. We're providing 71 parking stalls, and you can see that most of the parking stalls, or the majority of them, are all within an underground parkade. There are a few parking stalls at the north part or the front of the lot that will be that are available for service parking for guests. And we have a mix of unit types. It's about 50-50 between 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units, where we're offering 35 1-bedroom and 36 2-bedroom. And here you'll see the elevations that are proposed. The site is sloped, and going toward it, slope. This is where I need tennis to fill in. The building the building is sloping, or the site is sloping, and so the building takes into account that slope and tries to have a nice view from both the east side and the north side as well. So the development will provide much-needed new and diversified housing for Parksville. Approval of this site will enable development of underutilized land, which will help Parksville because of not only the existing infrastructure will be maximized, but it will also provide potentially increased taxes on the site. By having more people within the downtown core, this will increase the vitality and safety of the downtown with more eyes on the street. The development supports the OCP growth plan through housing choice by providing expanded and diversified housing to help meet the growth population need. And then the the site is near employment, commercial core, and school and community amenities. Therefore, the location is key for this site, and it's a really great site. It also supports the utilization of alternative transportation choices, specifically walking, biking, and transit, which will ideally result in reduced emissions. And then with this site also, there was a request from the Calgary Fire, or from the fire department, to provide a $1,500 community contribution to support education in fire safety, and this will also be part of the contribution for this development. Thank you, and we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. Questions? I see Councillor Wilson's hand is up.
And thank you for the presentation. I did have a few questions, and they're mainly about the zoning, because I'm a little bit confused about the ask for an amendment as opposed to a rezone. And so when I look at the CD 19A zoning, apartments are for 18 units, and let's see, assisted living and community care for 71 dwelling units. I understand that this once was zoned that way, then it went back to an apartment for 18 units, and now you want to go back to 71 units. But I guess where my confusion in this is, should this amendment really be a zone change? Because you're really trying to change a CD 19A zone for an apartment use, when really that specifies 18 units, and that would require a public hearing. So I'm just wondering about that. That's my first question. So, and it seems to me it's rather similar to 155 Molliette, which has an RHD4 zone to it, which would be similar to what I think is happening right now with your request. And so the other question I had was...
Can I just ask
Sure,
you? Well, let's let the Director of Planning answer your question first on the rezoning.
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Wilson, it is all zoning bylaws that we pass that are changes to the zoning bylaw are amendment bylaws. This will be going to a public hearing. It's the same process as any other zoning bylaw change.
Thank you.
Question 2.
Thank you. The other question is about the height, and I noticed I was prepared for it being 16 meters. It's 15.5 meters. So does that include the parkade, or will that be 15.5 meters in addition to the parkade height?
So as far as I'm aware, the height is from the ground elevation up, and so it would the parkade would be underground. So it's height.
Go ahead.
Oh, just to
Yes,
clarify.
the total height is 15.5.
Okay, so the actual parkade is underground?
The parkade is
underground.
underground.
It's not? Okay, I was thinking
So
it was
the
a ground
elevation
level.
goes from the ground
Gotcha.
up. The parkade is underground.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is that it? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for your presentation. It's quite clear that the drawings are exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing something on that site. It's remained vacant for some time, so I'm glad to see some development, and I appreciate the fact we're getting more rental housing into our community, which is a big factor, and it's been a big ask of the community up until this time. Just regarding the sustainable community builder checklist, anyways, that you had to fill in for City of Parksville, anyways, under the section here, anyways, explaining about the environmental practices and so forth. You suggest, anyways, the landscaping will include public amenity areas such as green spaces, courtyards, benches, shaded areas, and community gardens. I was trying to follow you on your plans, and I really didn't see that as an identified site, or is it kind of in advance, or just in the works now? All that I was going to suggest is that it's a good idea, but the thing is that, we wouldn't be against you, like creating a nice little space there for your tenants, a green space is, the tenants, deserve a space like arbors, maybe a water feature or something like that. Don't be afraid to spruce it up and, because you're going to be in a competitive market out there, right? So the thing is that maybe it's going to give you an edge, but it is also good for the community as well. So if that could be a consideration you put in, maybe you have, but I didn't see it on the plan, and maybe you're ahead of the game.
For sure, that's something that's under development, so we'll definitely take that into consideration.
Have you identified what part of the section, east, west, or whatever you're thinking about it, or is it just at where you're considering the guest parking area? Was that?
So we've considered a few options. One of them might be like a rooftop patio or rooftop area that could be used, and then we did have originally a space that would have been at the front of the parcel that could be used. So this. Again, it's under development, and we can provide that as we move further through.
Thank you.
Councillor Frass.
Thank you through to the mayor, to the delegations. Thank you, Sarah and Terry, for coming out today. Appreciate having a chance to see what you guys are looking to bring to town here and ask you some questions. What I have, my questions in regard to electric vehicles. We're constantly being asked as a council as to how we're preparing for the future for lower emissions, electric vehicles, and so on. Recognizing that there are apartments there, I'm wondering if you're going to be having any electric parking charge stations. I didn't happen to see it, but I could have missed it in the builder checklist there. But I'm just thinking about the people that would be moving into apartments that may have electric vehicles. Will they have ability to charge there?
Yeah, I know. In a few other buildings we do have the ability to include electric charging stations. So if that's something that's wanted on this site, we could probably include that. Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, there aren't any provisions for them, or that's not, like it hasn't been included so far, but you're willing to include them? Is that?
Yeah, it hasn't been included, but I know that our other buildings they're wired for electric vehicles, and so that could be included. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, through your worship, to the delegation. Thank you for coming out today. I thought your presentation was really well put together and easy to follow. There's also, as Councillor O'Brien mentioned, it was great to see the look of it. I'm really impressed with the one on Molliette. That looks like a great facility, and I can imagine they're a little more pricey, some of the units that are in there, but it's really well put together and great color schemes, and so I think it's a good addition to that area. So I really just wanted to say I support it. I think it's great that you're coming to town and putting something there. So thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you very much. We do appreciate your delegation, and we'll be seeing you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Much.
Correspondence, there was one late item. We have one piece in it. This is what I mentioned earlier on, was the Ministry of Health handling the proposed regulation. I'd like a mover and a seconder so that we receive it in for information purposes. Councillor Fraz, seconded by Councillor Chandler. Okay, let me just get it up and then we can talk about it. All right, go ahead, Councillor Fraz.
I just have a comment on it and kind of question, I guess, over to staff. Recognizing that this isn't actually the formal rejection itself, it's just an apology for not touching base with council ahead of the newspaper. They mention here that they encourage the city to work with Island Health to find operational solutions. We've already gone down that path of asking for a meeting with Island Health, and which they wouldn't come to the table for. So I'm wondering what the deputy minister is thinking, if they've offered any kind of options out there of how or what they expect out of working with Island Health, because having already done that, I don't know what more they're looking for us to do. So wondering if maybe you can comment on that, or if staff had any suggestions as giving us some advice as to how they read into this of what we should be doing.
Good question. One that I had earlier today and on Friday when we received it. I think the big thing here is we need to send them to the deputy minister one final letter saying it's nice that you're sorry that you went to the media first and not us, but tell us what the decision is and give us the backup for that decision. What were your reasons for decline? And if they don't provide it to us in a relatively short period of time, we've had the conversation. Is perhaps the next step is to go to third reading and push the button. I mean, we know at the end of the day they're not going to let us carry this through to the end, but the more we can push, the more we might get out of it. All I want to do is hear what they have to say and why they're doing it. My greatest fear here, Councillor Fraz, is the fact that I don't think they have a reason why they turned us down. I really don't think they have that reason at this point in time. They've just turned us down because the experts told them that they didn't want to mess with the harm reduction program that they have. So let's see what happens is really what I think we need. This is where we need to start pushing a little harder. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, it does. It brings up my same kind of thoughts there too, how they're saying work with Island Health, but this isn't Island Health's decision. This is the ministry's decision. So I do agree with you that I don't think they have any reason to be rejecting it, or they haven't given us any notices what that is or what they would like to see. So yeah, I agree with you there.
I would ask for council's patience for just a little bit longer. Let's send the one more letter out, and let's see what the response is. We're not going to let them go out on a long line on this one. Let's keep it short and wait to hear what they have to say. Okay. Does staff have anything to add to this? Okay. So we have a motion on just to receive the information, or receive the correspondence. I have it by Councillor Fraz and Councillor Chandler, and if there's no other comments, then I would like to call the vote. All those in favor? Carry. Thank you. Reports. Mr. Russell, would you give us a background on the issue regarding the rezoning for 150?
Sorry. If I may, Your Worship, for council consideration this evening is an introduction of the rezoning on McMillan Street. Essentially, from a staff perspective, this is almost like a housekeeping amendment. It's normalizing the zone and basically allowing for 71 residential units, comparable to the existing 71 units of various care facilities that are permitted on the property. And its proximity to downtown, from a planning perspective, would appear to be a positive addition, given the kind of synergies of residents in proximity to shops in that area. The recommendations are as per the agenda.
If I may just ask a question, and then just for clarity, if nothing else, to the director. So this was originally zoned adequately for this facility originally, is that correct? In accordance with the OCP and everything, it was ready to go, and then somebody came along and asked to have it rezoned to the 18 units. Is that the way I understand this?
If I may, Your Worship, there's a bit of nuance, but it's slightly different than that. So it was originally zoned for a 71-unit care facility of both assisted living, congregate care, and community care facility. That project, for whatever reason, didn't proceed. A number of years later, and I believe a different OCP later, an amendment was made to add 18 residential units to that existing, basically that existing zone. And this is now a third zoning bylaw amendment application to now allow for a residential occupancy to the same level that was originally approved for the various care facilities.
Thank you very much for that point. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Moved Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Discussion. Councillor Fraz.
Through the Mayor to the Director of Planning, just recognizing in the delegation they mentioned that they have 71 parking stalls for this building. Typically I've seen parking requirements be around 1.5 or 1.2 parking spaces. Is there, can you confirm, is this one just zoned for 71 is the requirement? Is that all that's needed, or? And perhaps why that it might differ for this area versus other nearby?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Fraz, in the zoning bylaw, those zones that have multiple family residential as a permitted land use are required to have 1.5 parking spaces per unit. Where apartment is listed as a given use, the maximum parking requirement when it's like a standalone use item is as 1 unit. Those considerations of that 1 unit, that apartment use, are typically considered where a development is in close proximity to either downtown or other commercial areas where generally it has greater walkability to those areas. An example of properties that currently have that would be the Berwick site next door, for example. So that zone allows for apartment use. It's in a very similar situation. It's directly across from downtown. So as a purely residential use, it has 1 space per unit. Same with the Jensen block properties.
Any other discussion? All right, I'll call the question on all 3 recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Mr. Russell, since you're sitting there, would you like to continue.
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. For council consideration this evening is a request for the issuance of a development permit to facilitate a small lot development. This request is to basically the permit approves the form and character of the single-family dwellings that will be within the single-family and small lot residential sections of the development. There's also a request to relax the internal front lot line setback to the road that'll form part of the internal development. This matter may be considered by council through the development permit. Further details provided in the report, and the recommendations are as per the agenda.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Greer, and seconded by Councillor Chandler. Discussion. Anybody have anything to bring up? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and if I may, through yourself to Mr. Russell, a question regarding on this development. I identify it looks like there's going to be 29 small lots that are created from this particular proposal. I was confused on the map here on page 41 of our package here. Anyways, as to the actual access to the site itself, I had written down, because the lighting is really bad in here, but
It is, isn't it?
just for reading small print. The question to Mr. Russell would be, would there be egress to this site from the Amity Drive cul-de-sac, as well as Blanken Road, and as well as a road which is unidentified on here off of Forsyth? Is there going to be 3 accesses to this particular area? It was just unclear to me, and I was just would need clarification, please.
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. Amity Way definitely connects to the proposed internal road. Blanken Avenue almost connects. Blanken Avenue connects to Amity Way before Amity Way connects to the internal road. But more or less, Blanken Way effectively connects to it. Like, you could drive through the development. It's just the way the intersections askew. So Blanken and Amity Way do provide access to it through that intersection on the top left-hand portion of the proposed subdivision.
On the bottom of the, Councillor Fraz thankfully sent me a larger map here. It just identifies road, Mr. Russell, is coming in. Is that road identified as one of the ones? Because further on down off of Forsyth Avenue, there's a road that appears to go nowhere. It's actually going to back into one of the small lots.
Correct. So the one road on the left-hand side, on the southern portion of the site, where lot looks like my eyesight's not good in here.
Yeah, about.
Looks like lot 29 and part of lot 28.
Yes.
That
correct.
road is not proposed to go through. The road that is between lots 22 and 23 is proposed to go through.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thanks very much. I just was hoping that it had access going both sides, and I see that it's actually connecting on, or will be connecting through, well, not exactly on this one, but there is a lane as well, or an access, and there's pedestrian access up at the top of the site already. So that exactly answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know whether you can answer this, Mr. Russell, but I guess what I'm wondering about is the building, the statutory building scheme, why it ends. I mean, it's probably not for you to answer that question. That would be for the builder, but it just, I guess I feel a little bit of concern because it ends, it says it ends once all the lots are developed. But I guess the concern here is this is a really small development, and I think there may only be one car garage but enough room for 2 vehicles. So one of the things that it prohibits under the building scheme is storage of recreational commercial vehicles and ensures screening of boats and campers. So I just wonder if it ends when the lots developed, that means that it could be a potential problem for parking and storage, et cetera.
If I may, Your Worship, that is a draft development scheme. It's something the city doesn't administer. Ultimately, it's in the purview of the developer. They're indicating this draft of what their intentions are. So I have a feeling that they will probably look at that in more detail as the project progresses. The development permit itself does run with the land I can't even say the word, in perpetuity until such time as someone applies to amend it. So the development permit and the terms that are in that permit will be in effect. Obviously, if there's RVs not parking in parking spaces, that becomes a bylaw compliance matter.
Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Your Worship. And as a follow-up to Councillor Wilson's, I think maybe Councillor Wilson was referring to the fact is how do we know, like after the development is up and running and so forth, that there can be no RVs parked in front of it? Is it replaced by the bylaw, or is there a covenant in place to suggest that this cannot happen in the future as well? Because it's a great scheme that is proposed anyways with the colors and so forth, but it was little things like, how is that going to be enforced? Is that going to be up to the city of Parksville, or is there a covenant in place to say that no RVs in the front yard, thank you very much? Because it's going to be just one more item that we're going to have to enforce. That's what I'm getting at.
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship, so a building scheme is enforced by the developer until such time as the developer no longer is a landowner, and then it becomes the parties of that developer's building scheme that actually are the ones that are able to take action through the legal system for a violation. So if you live in a neighborhood, my understanding, not a solicitor, but if you live in a neighborhood with a developer's building scheme and there's a prohibition against something, you can seek legal advice on whether or not that covenant can be addressed.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Another question or response to that is that many developments, myself, I live in one, that had a builder's building scheme and a covenant on it, but we're told, too bad, it's over, and you can't do anything about it. So they do seem to have a limit, and that's, I think, what I was getting to with that question.
If I may, Your Worship, I don't think I fully answered Councillor O'Brien's question. When it comes to whether there was a zoning bylaw or the covenant, it's whatever's more restrictive of the two. So if the covenant allows for something, but the city has a zoning bylaw that prohibits something, it's what's more restrictive of those two documents.
Any other questions? All right, let's call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Russell, you're doing well.
If I may, Your Worship, this is from a staff perspective, a fairly straightforward application. It's an addition to the front of an existing single-family dwelling. The single-family dwelling happens to be located in proximity to the marine foreshore. In this case, the environmentally sensitive aspects are limited. It's not near the ocean. It's going to the front of the house towards the road. It really is under consideration of the hazardous conditions, being in an area near the ocean where sea level is in effect. In this regard, a professional engineer's report by a qualified geotechnical engineer has assessed the proposal and provided recommendations that form terms of the permit. So for this evening, the recommendations are per the agenda to issue the permit.
Thank you. Need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Councillor Chandler and Councillor Wilson. Discussion? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Russell, could you give us a background on the electrical vehicle fast charger grant?
Yes, May Your Worship, and if I may just quickly hand out a handout.
Certainly, feel free. Thank you.
Couldn't get it to work. If not, I'll wing it. Is it this thing? Sometimes you have to. It didn't like it.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
It'll go through. Here's a go through. Yeah, wait to do it properly. It's
Oh,
easy.
awesome. Thank you. I'm going to probably kind of rush through this presentation, but it's really just essentially the information that's in the handout that I provided from the federal website. Essentially, there's a federal grant for up to 50% of the costs for what's called a DC fast charger or a high-speed charging station. Some of their criteria are that it must be located near a highway, near a national highway. So that might be like the Inland Island Highway, for example. It must have access 24 hours a day. It must be capable of being networked. It must be capable of taking like payment and not just be exclusive to one of the special EV networks, but also allow for alternative payment. So this is where it gets into 50%. So we have to demonstrate, if council's interested in proceeding with this, that we have to have about up to 50% of the costs secured. We have to demonstrate that we've talked to an energy supplier. So in this case, our energy supplier would be BC Hydro, and that we have access for land. So an example of land we might have access to might be Despard Avenue, which is near the Inland Island Highway, for example, where we have a overly large right-of-way and there's 3-phase power available. So in addition to this 50% federal cost, because we're in British Columbia, there's additional funding available for 25% up to $25,000 for the funding for the DC fast charger. In total, if it's a government project, the maximum government funding can be up to 100%, which essentially would mean probably kind of a 2/3, 1/3 scenario. Based on, say, a cost of $150,000 for the whole installation. These are just a list of the eligible expenditures, so the salaries of the professionals involved, capital expenses, travel expenses, those sorts of things. Ineligible costs are the land costs, so we have to provide the land. It doesn't cover the ongoing operational costs. They didn't give us much time. I basically got a Facebook ad that was from a company that makes these things, and that's the only reason why I'm aware of this grant that has a deadline of July the 22nd. So I apologize, this isn't the most in-depth presentation. This is just a quick map from PlugShare, which shows DC fast chargers on Vancouver Island. Qualicum Beach has a public fast charger. It happens to be one that's operated by BC Hydro. There is a slower speed fast charger in Parksville that's operated by one of the car dealerships. It's a 25 kilowatt hour charger. It's limited to customers of the dealership, and it's only open during customer hours. On a typical electric car, the one at the dealership, as I said, it's a lower capacity, it's sort of a medium speed charger, I would call it. It would take a couple hours to charge a car. Whereas the more substantial ones that are operated by BC Hydro, these are typically 150 kilowatt hour chargers. A car might charge in anywhere from an hour, half an hour, those kinds of ranges to get up to 80% of capacity. This is an estimate from the U.S. Department of Energy on what the installation costs are. So for equipment, they're talking in U.S. dollars of $40,000, plus as far as the site preparations, about another $50,000. I would, given that we're in Canada, the market may be less competitive here, I would estimate a minimum of, ballpark about $150,000. I'm bringing this to you today to see if there's council interest for us to apply for this grant by July the 22nd. And if it was approved, they would be looking at I think, making an announcement in October, and we basically have 2 years to complete the project. So as I said, it's just to see if there's a council interest to proceed with something like this. I know in the past we have made grant applications that we haven't been successful at for a level 3 charger in the community. Anyways, that's all I have. If there's more questions, happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Greer. It's hard to, you got Councillor Patterson in front of you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Russell. We're not talking something that's very cheap here, for starters, which I'd have to question. And certainly, I have not been in favor of electric cars from day one. And I think it was the last council that put through some electric vehicles thinking that we should be leaders in this field. However, it's all driven by environmentalists. And we are now having environmentalists come out and saying there's a tremendous amount of destruction with the lithium being mined in the different countries. There's 4 different countries that it's mined in, 3 in South America and 1 in Australia. It's highly flammable and explosive material, and it's destroying the environment in those areas for the local people. And I'm not sure, the batteries right now last, I think, 6 to 8 years, 9 years, and there's no recycling available for it. So we're going to end up with millions and millions of batteries, and what do we do about those? And it's always good for these environmentalists to come up with great ideas, but in the long run, sometimes they're very faulty. It's no different than the windmills. The windmills are good for about 15 years. And now we got to dispose of all these blades that are 130 feet long or whatever they are. And now we're burying them because we can't do anything with them. And there's millions of them. So when you're talking about wind and electricity, I think, it was all great that environmentalists put these things forward, knowing very little about what would happen down the road. And we're getting down the road now where we're going to have another environmental problem. So I'm not in favor of this electricity at this time. And I know that the first CAO that I worked under, we talked about it for years, and he was not in favor of it either. He could see the problems coming in the future. So I think the future is here, and I think we're going to have to make some big decisions in the next few years. Anyway, just my comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment, and just in further to Councillor Greer's comments. I feel like the electric car is coming, whether we like it or not, and there's been some recent conversations that Honda and all of the other dealers are starting to come out with lower price vehicles. We're going to see more and more need for it. But I don't think it's really a city responsibility to come up with a charging system for other than our own vehicles that we're dealing with, and potentially people using that with a charge basis. But I think it's more of a Department of Highways scenario where if you're looking at getting people from one place to another, either they partner up with some gas providers that want to look at co-partnering a project like this or something along that lines. I think putting it into this responsibility of a city to come up with the costs for this, I don't think it really makes a lot of sense. It helps some people with electric cars, but it costs everybody. And so it's kind of like the transit system. That's just my comment. I think that I'd love to see this go with some sort of a commercial application and a provincial application as opposed to us handling it. So I wouldn't support this motion.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Mr. Russell. I haven't had a chance to really go through this. Maybe the answers are in here, Blaine. I'm looking at it from an operational point of view. You mentioned that the operations cost would be the expense of the city of Parksville. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, that would be correct.
Thank you. At some time, I've noted in other jurisdictions and so forth that these, even before we got into the fast chargers, there was a token system that was used anyways by electric car owners that if they were charging their car at a private facility and so forth, they had to provide a token, or they belong to the Electric Vehicle Association. I'm not sure how it was. So they were actually paying for a portion of the charging fees itself. In fact, the BC Hydro kilowatt hour charge. Is that proposed in these type of things, or is it just a free ride?
If I may, I can't even speak today. If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor O'Brien, this program allows for you to charge. They don't restrict the municipality from being able to do cost recovery on it. I would not recommend going ahead with something like this without doing cost recovery and charging for a per charge, either per charge basis based on time or kilowatt hours for such service. Because, as I said, when we're talking kilowatts, like 100 kilowatts or 50 kilowatts of electricity, there are expenses with that, absolutely.
I thank you, and that answers my question pretty well as far as cost recovery for operations. I believe that, as Councillor Chandler has pointed out, it's coming, the Teslas and all the rest of it. And the thing is that I believe that it would be somewhat of an economic driver. You described as a potential site down on Despard, anyways, at the entrance to the city, anyways, from the Alberni or from the freeway. The thing is that people that are driving the electric vehicles that are going to be getting a little low on juice is going to, if they know that we have a site down there, they're going to definitely come into Parksville. Maybe while they're here, they're going to spend some money anyways and support our economy here. So, and with the fact that I think we have to roll with it, I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I also support this idea as well. I think that in reference to Councillor Greer's comments about he's correct in some ways, and yet technology is advancing pretty quickly along with batteries. So I'm not too worried about that. And it being an environmental disaster right now, I think that the benefits far outweigh any negatives to this. And yes, electric cars are coming, and we're not going to stop this wave. And so I wanted to ask Mr. Russell, if we do make this application, if you make this application, are we obligated to follow through with this? I mean, we may or may not get this. And also, are there other grants that we may apply for? I have someone in mind who keeps sending me information and talking to me about this, so I may have some. I haven't been able to reference that material right now, so.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson, as far as other grants go, they come and go from time to time, so this isn't the first time that grants have been available. So I'm not privy to every grant that's out there. This one I just happened to stumble across. And sorry, there was another part to your question.
I wondered, through Your Worship, I wondered if we do apply for this, are we obligated to go forth with it, let's say, if we decide later we don't want to spend the money?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson, I haven't gone in and actually entered the application form, and I think that's where it'll tell us in a bit more detail. There's nothing in the literature provided so far that would indicate that, but I believe that application form, if we're authorized to fill it out, would detail that. And certainly before it was filled out, that would absolutely be something that we would ensure that there's a back-out provision in it.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to the Director of Planning. Thanks for the questions from Councillor too that answered quite a few of them that I had in mind, particularly if there would be a back-out clause in it. One of the questions I was going to ask too is how much time you might anticipate, but if you haven't seen the application yet, then I don't think you'd know the answer to that one. But it's one of my concerns though with that too is since this wasn't something that was kind of in our target recently. Would there be possibility of, in your opinion, though, partnering with groups like the Parksville Qualcomm Beach Tourism Association to see if they wanted to, like, just going on Councillor O'Brien's comment about adding tourism to the community, to see if they would want to be the ones to handle the operational costs, or it'd be a tourism project versus a city infrastructure, and perhaps we would just do the grant submission and the land offering.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Fraz, I don't believe there's anything at this point that would preclude that as part of discussions, even future discussions. I don't think they're necessarily a requirement of the grant. There's really nothing in the grant that in the literature provided that indicates that there's it just basically says, as the owner of this thing, you're responsible. So how you partner with others does not appear to be precluded. So I think those discussions could certainly occur. I don't know if I'd be very surprised if we could make them occur by the 22nd, but we could certainly reach out to see if there's an interest. I think preferably the cost recovery would be built into the charging rate. Typically those that I've seen at commercial chargers are about four or five times what you would pay for electricity at your residence. They're actually fairly comparable to gasoline prices at those recovery costs.
Okay. And then if I may, just I heard the cost of about $150,000. Is that kind of the estimate as to what a charger typically comes in at for the DC fast charge?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Adam Fraz, that's, as I said, I've got the U.S. Department of Energy estimates. I'm ballparking at a level that I'm comfortable with, which is $150,000. Additional costs that aren't really, there's the station itself, which are typically about in the $50,000 ballpark, but you need three-phase power. You're going to need transformers on the pole for the three-phase power. And then there's going to be the site prep itself for the parking area, the paving, curb gutter, those kind of costs that are associated with it. So it may come in less than that, but I wouldn't be comfortable saying that it would be less than that at this point with the information to date. I should point out that there may be gas tax funds that could be used for this purpose. That could be could be allocated as the city contribution.
Thank you.
Just a couple of points, if I may, on this one. First off, I think it's a great idea. However, we're getting outside of our lane of jurisdiction here. We're now looking at providing utilities of some sort or a product of some sort where we're going to be selling or giving away a product. That is not anything that the municipality was ever deemed to be part of. So I have a real concern about us getting into this, especially at the tune of $150,000. If we've got to come up with 30% of it, that's, you know, 50 grand. It's not the end of the world, but where does it stop? Who pays for this ongoing for the, we have no idea what the ongoing operational expenses are here. I agree with what everybody's saying. I think electrical vehicles are a thing of the future. It's going to happen. I don't see it being the responsibility of the municipality to be involved in providing the fuel for these, and for lack of a better description, the fuel for these vehicles. Even today, I have a real problem with giving the fuel away or giving the electricity away for electrical vehicles in town here, as we're doing with a number of the locations. So I will not be supporting the idea of moving forward with this only because I just don't think it's part of our responsibility. It's not part of our jurisdiction. It's no different than a lot of the other things that we bring up before us. As Councillor Fraz brought up, it's not in any of the priorities that we established at the beginning. I just say, you know what, nice to have, but it's not necessary to have. And I'd say let's pass on this one. That's my view. So, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could ask one more question. I agree with your scenario on supplying electricity for the world. Do we know what it costs the city now for the outlets that we have? Do we have any idea? Because we're not charging for those.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, I actually will be bringing a report forward fairly soon this fall on that specific topic, but I don't have the numbers on me. Because they're so much slower at at charging, we're really talking like 14 cents. I think it's like 14 cents an hour for each vehicle that's plugged in. So it's in the grand less than 14 cents per hour for every time you see a car plugged in. So it's in the grand scheme of things, you know, a couple $1,000s a year would be just my crazy guess on it. But
Just offhand, how many do we have?
we have 3 chargers.
3,
currently.
that's what I
Yeah.
thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I also want to say I agree with Councillor O'Brien that this, I believe, will be part of an economic driver for us. I think it's important that a city like Parksville that's growing so much stay ahead of the curve. And I think this is a really good way to, a good thing to offer for people. And I'd like to ask Director Russell whether or not these grants come by fairly often or whether you have any idea.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson, and I'm just going from my memory, I think it was about, I'm guessing 5 years ago was the last time the city applied for a grant for a high-speed charger, and it wasn't successful in that application. That was in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce at the time.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess what I'd say is I just don't see the harm in us applying for this, and if we come to the place where we don't have a back out, a way to back out of this, then I guess we can decide not to do it, but I just don't see any harm in us applying for this right now.
Thank you, Your Worship. I tendency to disagree at this particular point that it's not a municipality responsibility. The City of Parksville has actually signed on to, in an attempt to reduce our carbon emissions, we have goals in place that we're trying to achieve on an annual basis, signed on by the city to reduce greenhouse gases. So I actually believe it is a municipal decision in this case and a responsibility. So with that in mind, with us attempting to do it with our facilities and so forth, I think it's incumbent upon us to follow through with that and encourage the use of these charging stations in our municipal area.
Thank you, and through the mayor to council. I appreciate getting this this offer for this grant coming up in front of us here. It's good to know and have the kind of conversation. For me, though, with the deadline being so close and without having complete information on it, it makes me a bit hesitant to think about moving forward on it. But more so because also we have a couple charging stations coming forward that we have got through the RDN with an application that we're doing as a region through them. So I believe we have 2 charging stations that are coming forward. And while they're not DC fast charging, we are still making progress down that electric vehicle path. I think one area that we should be focusing on, though, is ensuring that when housing projects or apartment buildings come forward, that they are preparing for the people that are going to be having electric vehicles into their facilities. And if this was something that we saw as a priority already, we identified and said, yes, we're keeping an eye out. So when a good deal comes along, let's make a move. It would be something I would go for. But at this point, it's a nicety, but I don't think we should be taking the staff time to go explore it for something just to see if we might back out down the line or try to form partnerships. Perhaps we could have that conversation going so the next time it might come along, because I think you'll see more things for DC fast charge improving along in the years to come as electric vehicles get more popular. So at this point, I'm not going to be supporting, if I know there's not a motion on the floor right now, but I'd be hesitant to support it for those reasons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a thought. We have several chargers right here, 3 altogether. If we were to get a fast charger, could we consider swapping out our slower chargers and selling it to recoup some of that money?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson, a couple things. We would have to investigate the terms of how the grant terms that were issued for those units. The value in the actual chart of the level 2 chargers themselves is really kind of in like the $3,000 ballpark per charger. So it's really on a scales of magnitude difference. The cable on a DC fast charger is about $2,000 to $3,000, just the cable itself. So they're just levels of magnitude difference that it probably, I don't think it would probably be worthwhile in my opinion, but yeah, but it's a nice thought. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I could make a motion that we turn down this grant money at this time. Maybe later on we can take a look at it when electric cars become more popular, but I feel that it's premature and I don't like the idea of spending that kind of money for everyone's electric car. Just to turn down the grant.
All right, am I up? If I may, Your Worship. The Financial Information Act requires all municipalities to prepare by June 30th a statement of financial information with prescribed information in a prescribed format. We call this document the SOFI. The deadline for this one this year was extended to August 31st, so we are not late at this point in time. In order to complete the report, it must be approved by Council. The SOFI contains the city's audited financial statements, schedules of council and employee remuneration and expenses, a statement of severance agreements, and a list of payments to suppliers and contractors, plus several other schedules. The recommendation is as per the agenda.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Greer. Discussions on this. Councillor Frass.
Thank you. I'd spoken to Lucky briefly before our meeting here, and so I wanted to bring up a question just in front of everybody so everyone could get the answer. I'd asked him if he could explain what some of the breakdown of expenses are that we're eligible for, just so I think it's we owe it to the public to be transparent and accountable for what the money gets spent on. So regarding council expenses, could you let us know what the variety and the types of things that expenses account for?
Yes, if I may, Your Worship. So the main expenses, or the biggest expense that virtually every councillor has is the UBCM convention. So there's hotel costs and travel costs and the registration costs for that. That's a fairly big chunk. And then there's also ABICC, which is a little closer, so it's a little cheaper than the UBCM. And also the mayor and Councillor Fraz went to FCM, and the FCM costs on Councillor Fraz expenses were around $3,500. So that's a fairly hefty cost for that one. And just the mayor and Councillor Fraz had that convention. There's also miscellaneous other small costs, but the majority of those three, two conferences for most councillors and the FCM for two.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that helps explain for people that these expenses are always work-related and typically tied to conferences that we attend to as a council. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Did we make the move? Did we move it? We did move it? All right, then. I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It was interesting. I did a calculation this week just for, I don't know why. I did a calculation. And if you took our budgeted operating costs and divided by the number of people in Parksville, it comes up to $1,347 per person in Parksville for the total operating costs for the city. That's not counting capital costs. When you compare it to all of the other communities right across the island, we're second best of all of the communities, only being beat by Comox by $20 a year. So I thought we should be proud of that and the work that council and staff, especially staff, are doing on keeping expenses down. So congratulations on that. Mr. Doxey, I think you're up next.
There we go. If I may, through your worship, I'll just go over some highlights of the development of this project, I guess over the last year and a half. As you can see above, a concept plan was done back in May of 2019 and presented to council earlier in, I believe it was February of 2020, with a conceptual cost estimate of $435. I can't read it in this lighting, but it's $435,500, I believe, or in that neighborhood, which you can see right in here for people that don't need reading glasses. Since that time, staff have done some additional survey work. I guess there's a few things. I should go backwards before I go too far. In the February 19 meeting where this was brought forward to council as a notice of motion, there was some significant discussion over the looking at increasing entrances and use of paid parking or time-limited parking, other options such as converting downtown streets into one-way parking and angle parking, taxing downtown vacant property to increase the utilization or even improve or have them upgrade to parking lot status kind of thing. Some discussion was opposed to the building of the parking lot, and then there was some concern over the loss of green space and or park-like amenity that was present there in the green space that's just south of Parksville Civic and Technology Center. So at that time, following that, with the approval of council to go forward to design a parking space within the green space off of PCTC. Staff generated 3 general concept plans that are prepared for you in the attachments. So they've evolved a little bit. So one thing you'll notice is further work has been done. So in the original concept that was brought forward, there was no identification of some of the memorial trees or benches. Since that time, we've dialogued with our operations, recreational services, community services department staff, and we've got a better listing and idea of the trees in the area, the memorial trees, the memorial benches. Furthermore, the area has been now surveyed, and so we have better detailed earthwork information, have subsequently moved the parking lot a little bit to the west. I'm sorry, east, the other west. It's been moved to the east. It does a couple of things. It reduces some of the impact on some of the memorial trees. It reduces some of the impacts to grading and earthworks, thereby reducing the costs. Some other factors there that do affect the cost, as one can see there, it's gone from, I can see it now, $435,500 now to estimated between, the estimates now are running between $525,000, $400,000, and upwards towards $787,000, and then onwards to $811,400. So there's a few developments along that. So the original estimate was based on pricing that had been coming back in the 2018 and very early 2019 season. Some of those initial basis cost estimates, some road capital projects like Moss, McKinnon, Wallace, they were coming back low, and we were seeing increased construction pressure pricing. We've since then seen some pretty good competitive pricing and bidding, like 8 vendors bidding on a PIM and Forsyth projects earlier this year, and then we've been working through consultants and access to their construction cost estimating for projects like Hearst and Memorial. And we've then, I guess since 2018, we've been through about 3 rounds of updating our cost estimating and then mated with better information, earthwork calculations. These are kind of the explaining where the estimates are at. One thing to also note is for the full build out, I guess the full parking lot, I guess it's the middle option. Option 2, that one's now at 91 stalls. Also for comparison against the original concept plan, this was for 78 stalls. And furthermore, the original estimate included approximately 2,300 square meters of asphalt space, whereas the newest concept plans are 3,325 square meters of asphaltic space. So it's more parking, and some of it's impacted by there's the option 2 is presented there in the full build out. It's got 2 access points to allow if there's an event or something where there's a lot of people coming or going at the same time. It allows a little bit of better traffic movement in and out of that specific parking area. Make sure. Otherwise, let's see here. The rest of the report fairly well clarifies the differences between the options. Again, there's the option 1 was at 40 stalls, and it's a simple widening in the roadway with minimal grading impacts, and then and that provides again that's the 40 stalls, and then going up to 91 stalls for the median price impact zone. And then the option 3 there with it only has the 73 stalls, but it has a bit of a feature space there that could be used for events or food truck or other plaza type space. I do believe that is it. If there are questions specifically pertaining to the concepts, the plans, or pricing them.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know what number you call this one. This is the one that we just got tonight. Is this the original one?
If I may, through Your Worship, that's the original concept that was prepared for the February 19 notice of motion.
Is there 2 outlets for cars here on this one? It's hard for me to tell.
If I may, through Your Worship, no, there's only one access point for vehicles. There's the other intersecting gray pavement line there is actually a sidewalk.
Is there a possibility to put another exit or entrance here?
If I may, yes, it would impact the amount of available spaces, and it would add to aisle space and ultimately the paving construction cost, but it could be done.
Good, thank you.
All right. Did you have a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is not so much a question, but I wonder if we could defer this until next council meeting so that Councillor Patterson is back. I know she wanted to also be a part of this, so I had hoped that this was going to happen before this presentation. I didn't realize we were just jumping into this, but I had mentioned this to our CIO today. So it would be great if we could all be here.
We need a motion before we can defer the motion. Okay, so that's the first step on this.
Right.
So, Councillor Greer, we're just on the conversation at this point until somebody comes up with one.
Yeah, through the mayor. The question is just regarding the first option you gave us there. You mentioned the cost was kind of estimates based on years past. Do you have any idea of what that option would come in at now? Like with the same information as the other 3 options, looking at the original?
If I may, through Your Worship, unfortunately, no. That original estimate was based on aerial site photography. It wasn't surveyed and engineered as much. These have been surveyed and include actual earthquake calcs, and so that would have to be rejigged, and it'd probably take about a week and a half worth of effort to get it to the same level of detail.
That is my preferred option based off of the use of the space, the amount of parking stalls in there, and I think what what my vision of the parking in the back had been. Granted, with what Councillor Greer had mentioned about having a secondary, I think a secondary exit point close to the 250 Craig Street sign there, or to let out onto Craig Street is what my vision of that would kind of be like. But I think I'd like to have more information on that particular design to have a better costing and site planning, so that it would, if it could fit in there, because that's the one I'd like to see go forward personally. So.
Well, yeah, let's do a motion, then we can talk about the deferral at that point.
Do you want a
Wait,
motion?
Hold on for a second. I'm being from the crowd back there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. If I may, Your Worship, we don't technically need a motion to have a motion to defer. If Councillor Wilson's motion to defer is voted on and passes, then there is no more debate. We don't need a motion
I
first.
don't know how you can defer a motion if it's not.
Her motion would be to defer the item. So it wouldn't be necessarily deferring a motion, just point of clarification. Sorry.
Thank you. But we have not received the report yet. So that's the first motion that we need to have.
If I may, Your Worship, it doesn't necessarily require a motion to receive. We can entertain a motion to defer the item before having any other motion come forward, if council wishes to do that.
Thank you, Your Worship. What if we want to make a motion to accept this first plan?
I don't, okay, well, you can make any motion you want on that, but then Councillor Wilson's motion to defer will come in right on the backside of yours, and then.
But do we have a motion from Councillor Wilson? Do we have a motion?
Currently, no motion.
No, there's no
No, that's
motion.
what I'm saying, but he's saying, Councillor Greer is saying he wants to make a motion, and I'm saying, fine, you can make that motion, but then Councillor Wilson's motion to defer would come right in behind it, and we would defer it anyways till next week, so, or till next meeting. Yes.
Excuse me, Your Worship, but I think I spoke about this before Councillor Greer, so I'm not sure how he could jump in with a motion before I was going to defer this. I'm a little confused as to how that order.
Your point's taken. Your
All
point's
right.
taken. We're in a conversation mode at this point in time. Go ahead.
So a question, if there is a desire to defer it till when there's a full council, and there's also a desire to get some more information from staff, like what I was alluding to is that in that first option you present to us, if there's an updated costing to go onto it, updated site
We're
plan
trying to
with
get
it,
to the same place.
it's gonna take, you said, a week anyways. That would push us to the next meeting, and what I wouldn't like to see is us to defer us to the next meeting just to then ask you to come back to the next one, and then it pushes us into September by chance. So I just want you to keep that in mind, because if you're putting forward a motion to defer, I think we can also just put a motion forward to get some staff information too that we need, that we're lacking right now.
Hold on for a second.
Council, we would get a motion to refer to staff with specific instruction, as Councillor Fass has mentioned, and then it would be helpful to have a specific date as to when council would like it to come back before you for discussion.
No, hold on. Let Councillor Wilson, she's the one that's going to make the decision.
Well, I was happy with it coming back on the 20th on our next meeting, if assuming that all councillors are going to be here. I don't know. I agree. You know, if you want more information, that's fine. And my understanding is from Mr. Doxey that could be done by the 20th.
If I may, through your worship, it technically could. We have some other projects that we would end up having to put aside, but yes.
Follow up.
Councillor Wilson, then Councillor.
So would it be easier to say for you, from a workload perspective, that it come back in September? Is that what you're thinking?
If I may, through your worship, yes. If we were to bring it back with a more detailed engineering analysis of that original concept plan, that would take, like I say, at least a week or so to get those numbers in place, and then that would make more sense to bring back in September. We could bring it back for conversation, and then if that were the desired option, then the 20th meeting would suffice. But
Make your motion. Make your deferral.
I'd like to,
Go ahead.
If I may make a suggestion for Councillor Wilson's deferral motion, to defer it until we're at full strength, as well as to receive additional information from staff. Just to amend that, that's what I would.
I need a date.
To the next council meeting. Is that okay?
that's fine. So you're suggesting that we get more information for the next, I'm sorry.
The
Would
motion,
you repeat that?
The motion would read, as your first one did, that to defer this for further discussion as directed by the CAO at this time until council is at full strength at the July 20th meeting, as well as at that time allowing staff to obtain additional information as requested.
That's fine.
CAO.
If I may, Your Worship. So the motion could be to refer specifically back to staff with the information Councillor Fraz had asked for, and then have it come back on the 20th. And if council would be agreeable to allowing us to just do a verbal presentation instead of preparing a report, we may be in a better position to do that, as the deadline for July 20th is this Friday. So to get it on the agenda, so if we could get that bit of leeway, that would be assisting us, I think.
All right, we can't have a conversation on this now. The referral is done. Pardon? You can. We're referring the item. So once that's been made, we can't debate it anymore. So it's. I have to call the question on the referral.
Second. I second.
Yep. Yeah, I know. No, you cannot discuss a referral. So.
That's it. Just vote.
We need. Pardon me.
Call the question.
I have to call the question. Right. That's right. So, all those in favor of referring this till the next meeting, which is the 20th? July 20th? Opposed? But, okay, carried is referred to the 20th. No, it's done. Mr. Robinson, you're on. And if you have a contentious issue, we're going to shoot you.
I know.
Sorry. If I may, Your Worship, this is a follow-up to Resolution 19258, which is regarding the cost and feasibility of installing solar-powered streetlights along Craig Street between Hearst Avenue and Jensen Avenue. Currently, this block is only illuminated by one Cobra lamp, which at the corner of Hearst and Craig, which faces onto Hearst Avenue. The engineering department is currently working on a comprehensive asset management plan for all city infrastructure that may affect the 2021 to 2040 capital renewal program, which will include improving lighting in the downtown core. Craig Street is currently planned for 2027 and would include the street lighting. As well, there was a request from the Parksville Downtown Business Association about requesting addition of electrical outlets onto the hydro poles along Craig Street. This is not considered an option, as BC Hydro will not provide electrical outlets on their hydro poles. The options, basically, when reviewing the potential and viability of putting solar-powered lights onto Craig, the required lumens for street lighting is they're not feasible due to the amount of space available in the platform and the sidewalk. We'd have to build out into the roadway for access on the sidewalk. And just the lights themselves, we wouldn't be able to provide that due to the lighting and the amount of battery power that's required. The drawdown voltage from solar power isn't enough to recharge the batteries for the 8 hours or 10 hours that the lights have to be illuminated. So that option was not considered an option. Option 2 got into putting a double davit on the existing Cobra light to illuminate onto Craig Street. The PDBA did not feel that this was going to provide any sufficient additional lighting. Option 3 went into status quo with the existing asset management of keeping the date of 2027 for reconstruction. Option 4 was moving the project date ahead, and option 5 provided installing wired streetlights. Again, this would involve some extensive reconstruction of the road, losing 2 parking spaces, and bulb outs. Estimated cost is about $80,000, and in 7 years we'd be pulling out all that infrastructure and rebuilding the road. Recommendations are as per the report.
Is it me? Is it? Yeah. I thought you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to propose a motion at this time to receive the report by Manager of Operations for the Craig Street lighting options as presented, and to further suggest the option 5 recommendation would be highly sought after, and to be included in that option 5 to include in the September-October budget discussions happening this year. If I may, Your Worship, thank you. And thank you, Kelly. It's a great report, and you turned over every stone to try and get this to happen. This area, as you know, is a black hole in our city. Anyways, at nighttime, the vandalism happens on a regular basis. I feel so bad for the businesses that are trying to operate down there. Stedman's has a can of paint and a paintbrush by the front door all the time just to stop all the graffiti that happens weekly on their basis. There are no streetlights there, which is just amazing to me. So the suggestion for 2 streetlights, properly wired streetlights, will give them not only the security and safety that they have, but also make it safer for our community, and also include some help to the PDBA for the businesses that are in that area type of thing, that feel the difference and feel safety for themselves when they lock up their stores on those winter nights. They feel very unsafe because it's dark. So I think it's time that we do something. Your comments about happening Craig Street are understood and received, but it's 2027 is when that's slated to happen type of thing. So I think that we could definitely fit this into our budget, and with the installation for 2021 just for this, and with the fact that it's going to lose a couple parking spots, I think it's fine. We were prepared to lose a couple parking spots when the local cafe Realm anyways was preparing to put some street benches out there, or do some of their expansion for their restaurant. So we were prepared to do that, and I think actually it would do a little fix-up of Craig Street at that area at the same time, and maybe it can just be included into the provisions made for the infrastructure in 2027. But in the meantime, give us some safety and security for 7 years prior to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Kelly, thank you for the report. Definitely, I know from 2012 when I started with my food truck down that area, I know Craig Street Merchants Association has been pushing for this, as well as the PDBA, for quite some time to get more lighting down there. So I think it's really, it's definitely needed, and especially in the wintertime, it's just like it's seriously dark down there. So I'm glad that we're bringing this forward, and I hope this all goes through without a hitch. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess my question to you, Kelly, is, and thank you, Councillor O'Brien, I agree with your idea, but I just want to make sure that I'm clarifying the option 4. How soon could that option be implemented? And I'm thinking about this with the option 5 as a combination, you know.
For that, I'd like to defer that to the Acting Director of Engineering.
If I may, through your worship, this would be something that we could get done in-house into the fall for a winter tender and spring construction. No, I'm sorry. The entire capital upgrade, that could be made through a motion to any specific time frame by council. So if they wanted to push it into 2022, that could be undertaken. Yeah, sorry. Yes, it could be just switched out for another project. 2021 would be a bit abrupt because it hasn't been scoped out so well. It is further out in the 5-year, but it 2022 would be an attainable target if you wanted to swap out the entire capital project.
Follow up? So I guess I'm just wondering, it would be nice to be able to do all the work and not have to come back and repeat it. But I appreciate that Craig Street really does need some lighting. So I guess can't you push it a little faster than that, Mr. Doxey? I mean, it would be really nice to be able to do it all rather than putting the 2 lights and then find ourselves redoing this. So it would be nice to find that middle ground right now that we can have it all.
As a point, it's not Mr. Doxey that will be finding the time or the money. It'll be council that has to find it, so we can, if need be, we can do it. Councillor Fraz is up, and then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you. Appreciate both the councillor suggestions on there on bringing the lighting forward immediately, and also the project is to make it a little bit more efficient as our costing there. Question I have is in communicating with PDBA, have they showed any willingness to contribute to lighting upgrades for their area? Just recognizing that what they do is to help out the businesses in the downtown core, and they receive money for that from the businesses down there. So are they willing to participate and contribute for lighting upgrades?
In conversations with them, they were going to take it back to their members, but at this time they didn't have any contributions or information back on that.
So with that being said, I would like to see some progression happen to be able to help out the businesses. I do really think the PDBA should be involved to some degree as a partner in them to help support businesses just as much as we are.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree that with Councillor Fraz that the ask should be made to the PDBA, but I think we should make the decision here tonight anyways to go ahead with the option 5. In reaction to Councillor Wilson's request to move the whole project ahead, that would be great in a great world where we have 10,000 staff with nothing else to do. But the thing is, I believe it would be at the expense of another project that has been identified as on the books for the next year or two type of thing. And they're very worthy projects that they already have, and I'm thinking Memorial right here, which is, we're so hyped up about it, I don't want anything to push that any further back. So I'm a little worried about that. This to me was just, it was a great suggestion. It was just a little side job, we can just set it up type of thing, and it's not going to take a huge amount of staff time, It's going to be 2 bumps in the road and a couple of lights. Hey, Kelly, sounds easy to me, right? The thing is that it's going to take very little staff time and so forth and planning to make option 5 happen. I was just trying to keep it simple. I understand what you're saying, but I also understand the staff are going flat out as the projects, and the other projects are really important too. So that's my comments on it.
Anybody else have any comments? I would certainly like to look at this in a lot more detail than what we are right now, so that we can decide if it's the right idea to redo the whole street now and change it with something that might be, I don't know what's on the 2022 list, to be honest with you, as to what could be swapped out, or if we can in fact maybe wedge it in somehow and find a way to do it. I don't know the answers to those questions, but if we go one way, then we've gone that way and we haven't given it the opportunity that it probably deserves to check into this. I would, you know, right now, I would like to see us at least take a look at it and bring it up at budget time and say, is this worth doing as a change, as a swap for 2022 somewhere? I mean, we did it on Bagshaw. We were able to move that around. There's some sense there. There's some common sense to be able to do that. If we're going to spend $80,000 to do a light, you know, that's just a contribution to the whole package. So I just think it's going to be, we may regret making a move quickly on this. Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I also like Councillor Fraz's idea of reaching out to the PDBA. It's one of the notes I had made as well. I haven't spoken to the PDBA as a liaison yet. Wasn't sure this was coming through. So I think that, as the mayor has said, it does beg being looked at, in that perhaps the PDBA should be a partner in this and be contacted to see where they are. It might make a difference in our budget as well.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to see more information on this as well. I'm not very pleased with spending $80,000 and then it's all gone to nothing maybe in 6 or 7 years, when maybe we could do this project within a couple of years or so. But I sure don't like spending $80,000 and then it's all torn up again and we start all over. So I'm not in favor of that idea.
Any other comments? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Pardon? Of Councillor O'Brien's motion. Well then, let's go. That's why I asked if there was any more.
Yes, sir. I was just in thought there while you'd asked that. Just in regards to having more comments, I agree with what I'm hearing around the table here, though, as far as getting a little bit more information. I think this is an important project that we bring to the community and for the businesses. But I'm also recognizing, like as you mentioned, that our staff time is very valuable, and a lot of the projects we've already gone through once to kind of see what how we can reorganize things and what our priorities are. You know, perhaps this is something that should be reevaluated in that list again too. Our budget's not going to be very long behind here. And if we're going to be reaching out to PDBA, I think maybe today is just not the day that I would be wanting to make a decision on this. I think we need a little more information. We can still evaluate and do if it comes to this option 5 is still the right choice. I think that is a better than nothing option. But I just don't know if today is a day I want to make a choice on that.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe if we revisit my motion, I think it actually called for moving option 5 to budget consideration for this fall. It was not to make a decision tonight on whether to do it. It was to move it in budget.
I apologize.
It was to move it in budget for budget consideration in the fall, which time we discussed pretty extensively, as might recall with budget discussion. So that was in the works, and the intent is just to have budget option 5 on budget discussion, because we couldn't approve something that isn't in the budget, was my thought. So it had to be approved in the budget regardless. So
then I'm fine with that.
Yeah. That's
Councillor Greer.
Yeah, Councillor O'Brien what is the point then of having number 5 if we're just waiting to the fall to see what we might come up with? I mean, you're putting a little bit of more onuses on 5 that this could happen in the fall. Why would you need that if we're waiting for more information for the budget?
Councillor O'Brien.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, the onus would be on option 5 because it identifies, Kelly has identified an estimated cost of $80,000. So we have a estimated cost on what it would cost to do exactly like this. We have this. That's the staff information for that. At the same time, as we consider our budget considerations, we could also have the information going into those budget meetings, knowing what the forecast is for the upcoming infrastructure program for 2021 and 22, and could we go full on with the Craig Street infrastructure plan at that time. Also, to clear up, the thing is that knowing how infrastructure projects work, there's some suggestion that this would be torn out if we went on with Craig Street infrastructure project. I'm really not sure that that would happen, that it would be torn out, it would be worked around, especially if it was of the new standard. But just regardless, it just gives us a starting point, Mr. Greer, that anyways we can look at this because it's, to me, is the best solution of all those. That's why I just identified that option.
Thank you.
Just to follow, I guess my point was it's not necessary to have number 5 in there if we're going to look at it again in the fall. Anyways.
Thank you, Your
Councillor
Worship.
Wilson.
So I'm just wondering if, to Councillor O'Brien, if we're looking at option 5, can we also add to that that we reach out to the PDBA? Or is this the time to include that? How are, when are we going to reach out to the PDBA, and should we have that on the table right now as part of this motion or this option?
Councillor O'Brien, this is your motion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through to Councillor Wilson, I think it would be prudent at this particular point to, as a liaison anyways, to just place the ask with the PDBA at this particular point, saying we're considering this is going to go for budget considerations in the fall of 2020. And would they be interested in any participation? You know what option 8 or option 5 is of a value of $80,000, which could be brought up to them. And I think it would be worthy of just have that discussion. Then during budget discussions, you as liaison would be a better place to inform the rest of council and staff as to what the total financial commitment would be. Thank you.
Are we finished? If we're finished, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? We'll give it to you. That's good. It's passed. Opposed? None. There we go. It was not either a late approval or a slow or a fast unapproved. All right, so it was approved by unanimously. He was on side. Yeah. You said no. Oh, geez. All right, you got it. All right, it's done. First reading on Bylaw Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 2000.129. The amendment to Comprehensive Development CD 19A at 115 McMillan Street South. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Fraz, second by Councillor Chandler. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. See, I did say opposed that time. Final adoptions. Sanitary and Storm Sewage System Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 1319.17 and Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018 number 2000.